They said no one ever touched him, and no one truly left his world the same. But Vanessa Quinn didn't come to play. She came to take Dominic Roth down. She was sent to expose him, to uncover his secrets, to drag the truth buried beneath his mask into the light. But he made her expose herself. One of them is lying. Both of them are hiding, and neither of them is ready for what happens when control breaks. Welcome to Stories That See You, where every story finds its voice. If you enjoy this kind of deep, emotional storytelling, please don't forget to rate this story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps me grow and tells me which stories speak to you the most. Thank you. Vanessa Quinn looked out the Uber window. Her fingertips were digging into the edge of her bag. She hadn't expected this assignment to shake her like this, not after serving as an intelligence officer in the Human Risk Division at the Global Tech and Ethics Commission, a watchdog agency investigating money laundering and behavioral manipulation across borders. But it was too late to turn back now. The mansion in front of her didn't look like a home. It looked like a trap, one built with precision. Its black stone walls rose into the morning fog like they weren't protecting what was inside, but locking everything else out. Her phone was still pressed to her ear. Cassandra, her boss, was trying to keep her steady. "Vanessa, calm down. You got this. Dominic's going to be impressed. And you're going to get that job." Vanessa swallowed. "I'm not afraid of not getting the job. I'm afraid of walking into that house." Cassandra let out a breath. "You're the one who agreed to the undercover mission. He won't suspect a thing. Just stay focused. He's got all your info. We gave you a solid backstory. Dominic ran the checks. He saw the references. You're a strong candidate. And in 5 years, you're the closest we've ever gotten to that place. So don't waste it, Vanessa." The call cut off. The sound of her heels striking the stone echoed in the air as she stepped out of the car. Swinging her backpack over one shoulder, Vanessa ran the last briefing through her mind, line by line. Earn his trust. Don't fall for his manipulation. Record everything. Get access to the servers and never, ever let him touch you. But the briefing had left something out. No one had warned her that even Dominic Roth's gaze could feel like a touch. The massive front door creaked open before she'd even raised her hand to knock. In the doorway stood a stone-faced man in his 60s, dressed in a dark suit. His cold eyes scanned Vanessa in silence. When he said nothing, she swallowed and spoke up. "I'm Vanessa. I'm here to meet with Mr. Roth." The man didn't respond. He simply raised a hand and motioned for her to follow. The door closed behind her. Vanessa had just taken her first step inside the ultra-modern mansion, carved into the Malibu hillside. As they walked through the wide corridor, nothing stood out. Everything was white, grey, and charcoal, cold, yet flawless. The man moved ahead without saying a word. Vanessa stayed close, matching his pace. Each time, the soles of her shoes met the stone floor. The sound echoed louder than she could stand, even to herself. Through the glass wall to her left, the Pacific stretched into view, as grand as it could possibly be. Instead of heading upstairs like she'd expected, the man turned toward a staircase that led down. Vanessa's steps slowed. She scanned her surroundings from the corner of her eye, careful not to make it obvious. The lack of explanation was starting to wear on her nerves, but she said nothing. The stairs led them into a long, bare corridor below ground. No color, no decor, just smooth surfaces and silence. In the back of her mind, the last briefing surfaced again, quiet but sharp. Earn his trust. Don't fall for his manipulation. Record everything. At last, they stopped in front of a black sliding door. The man reached into his pocket, pulled out a card, and pressed it to the panel without a word. When the door opened, Vanessa stopped without thinking. This was a garage, but not the kind she was used to. This place looked more like a showroom. Inside, two luxury sports cars and a black Jeep sat in a clean, perfect row, and between them, two Harley-Davidsons. One of them, matte black, wide-framed, old-school, looked like it was still alive somehow. Next to it, a man was bent over the bike, wearing a plain white t-shirt and worn-out jeans. He was tall. Every move he made looked deliberate. Nothing wasted, nothing careless. Vanessa took a few steps forward. "Hi, I'm Vanessa. I'm here to meet Mr. Roth." The man didn't turn around. He didn't move at all. Then, still with his back to her, he said, "This isn't just a bike. It doesn't shine for attention. It doesn't growl for respect. It moves in silence, and somehow the road still clears for it." He kept working the cloth over the tank, slow and steady. "Springer front end. Some say it's outdated. They're wrong. That piece means loyalty. This machine doesn't say much, but it tells you exactly what kind of man you're dealing with. And no, you don't own it. You earn its trust, if you're lucky." Then he looked up. First eye contact, no words. And then, slowly, he turned to face her. Vanessa's breath caught for a split second. The man looked her over, calmly, without rush. A faint, unreadable smile curved at the edge of his lips. Then he turned back to the bike. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then he spoke. "I'm Dominic Roth, and if you want this job, there are rules." Vanessa's eyes moved without meaning to the way his muscular arms wrapped around the frame of the bike, to the strand of hair that had fallen across his forehead, to the strength in his wrists and hands, and how those same hands moved over the machine with unexpected care. She swallowed. Dominic kept talking, never once looking at her. His voice was firm, almost like a command. "You'll be living in this house. There's a space downstairs set up for you, comfortable enough. Bedroom, bathroom, your own balcony. You'll need to get along with Ernest. He matters to me. You'll be handling the entire flow of the house, scheduling, structure, everything. Every morning I expect white lilies in the house. By 8 a.m., everyone should be up. I don't like people who sleep too much. You're never to enter my office unless I invite you in. Not ever. Sometimes we'll have breakfast together, go over the day. Dinner, I prefer alone. You'll read to me, selected passages, from books I choose. 1 hour, no interruptions. I hope you're a decent reader." Vanessa hesitated. "You mean I'll be reading to you?" Dominic nodded. "I enjoy being read to. Is that going to be a problem?" Vanessa shook her head slightly. "No, not at all. You want me to read to you? Got it. And Sundays are yours." Vanessa stood still, listening, unsure what to say, unsure what to do. Dominic went on, his tone unwavering, "And most importantly, you'll be in charge of organizing the events held in this house. We host people who move the world with a signature, the kind whose names never appear in headlines but whose decisions shape them. Old money, new empires, shadow governments, royalty, tech gods, oil dynasties. This place is where they come to play, negotiate and indulge. Discretion isn't preferred, it's sacred. Even after you leave this job, you will never speak of what happens here. Not to friends, not to family, not even in your sleep. There's a clause in the contract. If you accept the position, you'll sign it, and if you ever break it, even after you've walked away, that clause gives me the legal right to take everything from you." Dominic climbed onto the bike, the machine he'd polished to a diamond-like shine, now locked between his legs. Vanessa could feel her heartbeat pulsing through her entire body. She brought a strand of hair to her lips, an old habit she hadn't shaken, one that always surfaced when she was tense. Suddenly, Dominic looked up. She froze, caught with the hair between her lips like a nervous tick exposed. She straightened up quickly, letting the strand fall away. Something in his gaze stopped her. There was a glint in his eyes that pulled at her, striking, controlled, electric. Amber. His eyes were amber, not hazel, not brown. Amber, sharp, bright, alive. She had never seen that color in a man's eyes, not like that, not looking at her like that. Dominic watched her for a few seconds, then let out a quiet laugh. "You're tense. That thing you just did, the way you brought your hair to your mouth, that's where you got stuck, isn't it? 7 years old, right there." Vanessa swallowed. "Is that the full scope of my job description, Mr. Roth?" she asked. Dominic didn't look away. He climbed off the bike and walked toward her, slow, measured steps. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough to make the air shift. "Your job description includes answering the questions I ask," he said, calm now, but cold. Vanessa held her tone steady. "I don't remember anything important from when I was 7, Mr. Roth." Dominic gave a slow nod. "All right. You've got 2 choices," Dominic said. "You can walk out of this house right now, or you can go upstairs, wait in my study, and sign the contract." Vanessa just stared at him. "Yes," he said. "What are you waiting for?" She turned her back and started toward the exit of the garage. "And, Ms. Quinn?" Vanessa stopped. "One more thing," he said. "The most important thing. I don't like being touched, no matter the reason. You will never touch me. If you do, the deal's off." Immediately, Vanessa stood at the door, her back still to him. 3 seconds, no movement. Her heart was pounding so loud it felt like he could hear it. She knew he was dangerous. She felt it in her gut. But he was also magnetic. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she could hear Cassandra's voice. "The chance we've waited 5 years for." When Ernest opened the main door, Vanessa stepped into the office, a space wrapped in glass from floor to ceiling, with the Pacific laid out like a living painting. The room was large and silent. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves in dark wood met massive glass panels overlooking the ocean, creating a strange mix of old-world gravity and sharp, modern clarity. Vanessa breathed in the scent of walnut and polished wood. Everything was orderly, expensive, and just personal enough to be unsettling. On the rustic wooden desk sat a large digital screen, too sleek for its surroundings, almost out of place. In front of it, a leather-bound planner. Beside that, a navy blue lacquered fountain pen. This man must be the Prince of Contradictions, Vanessa thought. And what about the black leather gloves next to the planner? Vanessa hesitated just for a beat. She took a few quiet steps toward the bookshelf. From floor to ceiling, the shelves were packed. Henry Miller, Anais Nin, Kafka, Jung. Had he really read all of these? Was she standing in the study of a criminal with a taste for philosophy? She was just about to turn around when something on one of the shelves caught her eye, and the second she saw it, her body tensed. A mask. Elegant enough to belong at a Venetian ball, but with something in its shape, something in its stillness, that felt more like punishment than celebration. A chill ran through her. What am I doing here? Still, her fingers moved toward it, slowly, cautiously. She let them brush across its surface. What could he possibly use this for? Just then, the sudden swing of the door made Vanessa flinch. Dominic stood in the doorway, fresh from a shower, the crisp white linen shirt clinging lightly to his still damp skin, paired with relaxed slate-beige trousers. A warm, exotic scent, something woodsy and deeply sensual, trailed faintly behind him. His eyes fixed on her. Interesting. Most people don't even notice that mask. Maybe you're not one of those who choose not to see. Vanessa smoothed her hair, a nervous reflex. Hard not to. It stands out. Dominic stepped closer, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. What Jung called the shadow. The parts of ourselves we suppress, desire, fear, violence, they always hide behind the mask. And some people, they forget how to take it off. He gestured toward the leather chair in front of the desk. Have a seat, Miss Quinn. He walked behind the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a file. Sliding it across the polished wood, he pushed it toward her, along with the fountain pen, slow, deliberate. Vanessa looked at him first, those confident, almost mocking eyes, then down at the 5-page contract in front of her. She tried to smile, but the tension in her lips made it clear it wasn't real. "This looks extensive." "You're welcome to read it," Dominic said, leaning back and lacing his fingers together. "Here, now." "I've got time," he said, "but once you sign, there's no going back." Vanessa swallowed. "Mr. Roth, may I ask what exactly it is that you do? I mean, if I'm going to live here 6 days a week and run your entire operation, don't you think I deserve a little more information?" Dominic tilted his head slightly. His gaze narrowed, measuring her. "I'm surprised you came here without doing your research, Miss Quinn," he said, his tone cold. He reached forward slowly and placed his hand over the contract in front of her. "Maybe you're not the right fit after all." Vanessa pressed her hand down hard on the papers. "I read that you own a tech company. There wasn't much else." "That's enough information," Dominic said, keeping his hand on the contract. "You have 1 more minute to sign, Miss Quinn. My time is valuable." Vanessa narrowed her eyes. "But just a moment ago, you said you had time." Dominic dipped his head slightly, raising one eyebrow. "For people who know what they want," he said, "not so much for the ones who hesitate." Vanessa didn't look away. She reached for the navy blue fountain pen and, without a pause, signed her name across the last page in bold, uppercase letters. "I think I'm more than suited for this job, Mr. Roth." But inside, another voice was speaking. "Vanessa, what the hell did you just walk into? How are you going to survive this man?" Dominic smiled. "In that case, welcome aboard. Settle into your room. You'll find a computer and the equipment you'll need inside. In 3 days, we're hosting a major event here. I'll email you the prep list. I'm very clear about what I want. Start working." Vanessa looked at him. Her mouth went dry. They held each other's gaze for a few seconds, tense, unreadable. "Yes," Dominic said. "Get to work, Miss Quinn. As I mentioned, my time is valuable." As Vanessa stepped into her room through the long side hallway, the first thing she noticed was the scent, subtle, clean, and unmistakable. White lilies in a vase. The room felt like a luxury hotel suite, spacious, high-ceilinged, with a window facing the Pacific. Soft beige tones in the bedroom, a small but modern workspace, and a sleek grey stone bathroom that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Everything felt a little too clean, too organized, too intentional. On the desk sat a bright screen computer, and beside it a white cell phone. Both looked brand new, untouched. Vanessa set her bag on the table. Her thoughts fired off instantly. "My clothes, my things. I need to go back. I need to pick up my stuff." She stepped out of the room and headed for the stairs, spotting Ernest at the end of the hallway. "Hi, Ernest, right?" she called out. "I need to leave for a bit just to pick up my things." Ernest didn't move a muscle. His response was flat, eyes completely still. "Miss Vanessa, I suggest you check the closets and drawers in your room." Vanessa froze, staring at him. Her voice cracked, her tone shifting with confusion. "Why? What's in the drawers?" Ernest paused for a moment, then gave a single-line reply. "Please review clauses 13 and 14 of your contract." And with that, he turned and walked away. Conversation over. Vanessa rushed back to her room. She flipped to the last page of the contract. Clause 13. Leaving the property is permitted only on Sundays. On all other days, this estate is to be considered your full-time residence. Departure is only allowed in the event of fire, earthquake, or flood. "What the hell is this?" Vanessa muttered under her breath. Clause 14. All clothing and personal cosmetic items are provided within the property. Only these items are to be worn and used. Except for necessary medications, no privately owned belongings are to be kept on site. This includes mobile phones and all personal electronic devices. Vanessa's stomach dropped. Seriously, this man isn't hiring help. He's looking for a prisoner. A tightness crept up her throat, one she couldn't even name. If he takes my phone, How the hell am I supposed to contact Cassandra? She moved fast, pulling open the wardrobe. Inside, a full row of clothing hung in perfect order, all elegant and all extremely feminine. Silk blouses, tailored pencil skirts, mostly dresses with high slits and low backs. Each piece looked like it had been made for her exact size. She looked down. On the lower shelves, rows of heels, every pair in her shoe size. Vanessa's eyes widened. She opened the drawers. The first one, black lace lingerie, delicate, expensive, carefully folded. The second, bodysuits, some sheer, some strappy, some barely more than a fine mesh. Vanessa picked one up, lace detailing along the shoulders, the back completely exposed. She held it in her hands, realizing she hadn't taken a breath. What is going on here? And how does this man know my body this well? A cold, crawling fear spread through her. The contract, the clothes, the lingerie. This wasn't just a mansion. It was a system, built, pre-designed, and fully controlled. Vanessa looked at herself in the mirror. What am I even doing here? How am I supposed to catch this man when I'm the one who's trapped? And more than anything, will I ever get out of here? Vanessa dialed Cassandra's number in a rush. It rang twice before Cassandra picked up. "Talk to me," she said. "What's the situation?" "I'm inside. I got the job. I had to sign a contract." Vanessa's voice was low, her tone tight, tense, controlled, but barely. "Listen to me, Cassandra. I have to surrender my phone, and I'm not allowed to leave the property except on Sundays." She took a breath, trying to steady herself. This isn't a job. It feels like captivity. "I'm not okay, Cassie. This man, he's unsettling." "How are we supposed to stay in contact?" Cassandra's voice came through the line, clear and sharp. "Okay, don't panic. I'll find a way to reach you, Vanessa. You just play your part. Gain his trust. Got it? Whatever you do, be normal. Be loyal. At least in his eyes. Until the event," she added. "Get into the system. Grab guest lists, files, whatever you can find. That night, that's everything." "How?" Vanessa asked, her voice unsteady. Cassandra didn't pause for even a second. "Figure it out. You're the first person we've gotten inside for years. Whatever it takes, Vanessa. I'll reach you. You'll hear from me." The call ended. Vanessa dropped her head into her hands. A weight pressed in, heavy and hard to name. Even the stunning view of the Pacific just beyond the balcony felt distant now, almost invisible. She whispered to herself, "Okay, Vanessa, this was your call. You wanted to be in the field. Now, do the job." Just then, there was a knock at the door. When Vanessa opened it, she found Ernest's expressionless, tight-lipped face staring back at her. He spoke with surprising politeness, completely at odds with the look on his face. "Miss Vanessa, have you found everything you need?" She gave a slight nod. "Did you read the contract carefully?" "Yes," Vanessa replied, her tone just a bit sharp. "Seems like you know it pretty well too, Ernest." He shot her a quick, cold glance. Vanessa immediately recalled Dominic's warning. "Get along with Ernest." She forced a smile. "I'm guessing I'm not the first person to sign that contract around here, right?" Ernest didn't flinch. Not even a muscle moved. Vanessa let the questions die. "Everything's fine, Ernest. The clothes, they're lovely." "Very well, ma'am," he said. "I'll need your phone, please." He held out his hand. Vanessa's grip on the phone tightened just for a second. Then she powered it off and handed it over. "Is there any medication you take or anything specific you need, Miss Vanessa?" "No, Ernest, thank you," Vanessa said, offering a smile that this time at least tried to look sincere. "Dinner is at 7:30 p.m. Mr. Dominic would like to join you tonight, since it's your first evening here." Vanessa shifted her gaze. "Tonight is Tuesday," Ernest continued. "After dinner at midnight is your scheduled reading time. You'll read to Mr. Dominic in his study for 1 hour. Any questions?" "No, Ernest." "Thank you," Vanessa replied, softening her voice as much as she could. "Good evening." Ernest turned like a soldier and disappeared down the hallway without another word. Vanessa let out a slow breath, then walked toward the wardrobe. She needed to choose something to wear for dinner. Her first dinner with him. She stood in front of the wardrobe, absent-mindedly pulling a strand of hair to her lips. This man isn't looking for an assistant. He's shopping for a runway model. Look at these dresses. Red silk, a blush-toned cocktail dress, a white one, tight, slit up the side. Am I supposed to walk around all day in these? And then the black dress. Lace, fully sheer across the chest. Vanessa blinked. Oh, come on, there's no way I'm wearing that. Her fingers brushed against a short black dress, the least provocative one she could find, maybe even innocent compared to the rest. She reached for it, then paused. Her fingers hesitated at the buttons of her blouse. God, what if he's watching? What if there's a hidden camera in here? She held her breath. Everything in this house felt like a trap. And this man, this strange, unreadable man, was capable of anything. She grabbed the black dress and slipped into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. If she had to undress, she'd do it where the walls couldn't see her. Vanessa descended the stairs with slow, deliberate steps. Her black, strapless dress moved like a shadow behind her, fluid as silk, clinging to her body like water, exposing her back almost to the base of her spine. Minimal, but dramatic, just like everything in this house. Her hair fell over her shoulders in loose waves. A single silver chain hung down between her collarbones, drawing all attention to the space no other accessory dared to touch. Her heart beat a little faster. This night, her first one-on-one with Dominic was step one of the plan. But even though she'd promised herself she'd stay in control, the air in this house, the presence of that man, the quiet in the walls, it was all slowly pulling her off center. When Vanessa stepped into the dining room, Dominic was standing by the window. Behind him, the city lights bled into the ocean, the dark Pacific flickering faintly in the glow slipping through the glass. The table was set for two. The chairs were spaced apart, not too far, not too close, a distance that felt intentional, like everything in this place. Dominic turned, his eyes moved over Vanessa, slow, measured. There was something in his look. Approval, satisfaction, maybe even conquest. Whatever it wasn't neutral. His lips shifted slightly, but he didn't greet her. Vanessa's voice was soft, but steady. Good evening, Mr. Roth. I was told we'd be dining together tonight. A flicker in his eyes. He was clearly pleased. I like your choice, Miss Quinn. Bold. Vanessa tossed her hair back, standing tall, trying to project confidence she wasn't sure she had. There wasn't exactly an innocent option in the wardrobe you picked for me, Mr. Roth. Dominic tilted his head ever so slightly, a faint smirk curling at the edge of his mouth. Thank you for being on time, he said. Please, sit. Vanessa crossed to the table. As she sat, she slid the short hem of her dress gently beneath her. The silence returned for a beat. Dominic motioned to the glass of wine in front of her. Pinot Noir, 2015, Dominic said. Structured, but patient. Not a wine that likes to be rushed. Vanessa lifted her glass just slightly. Patience is usually dangerous, she said. Waiting is its own kind of power. Even to her own ears, the line landed with more weight than she expected. But she had already decided, if she was playing this game, she'd play it by his rules. Dominic let out a low laugh, but his eyes didn't smile. Let's see how much power you're holding, Miss Quinn. Dinner began in silence. On their plates, warm seafood, shaved asparagus, lemon risotto. No server in sight, just faint jazz drifting in from somewhere behind the walls, and their breathing. After a few bites, Dominic finally spoke. You know the contract you signed wasn't for an ordinary job. Vanessa didn't look away. She lowered her head slightly. Of course I know, he continued. Most people walked out when they heard the terms. Why didn't you? Vanessa set her spoon down gently. A small smile touched her lips. Maybe I'm not the type who's after ordinary work, and your offer was more than generous. Dominic furrowed his brow slightly, then slowly refilled Vanessa's glass, watching her the entire time. Do you need the money? Vanessa didn't answer right away. She took a slow sip of wine, never breaking eye contact. Who doesn't? Dominic nodded, a half smile tugged at his lips. I don't. A brief silence. And you answer questions with more questions. Vanessa gave a small shrug. Sometimes the best answer is a better question. Dominic leaned back, studying her. He set his glass down, then slowly traced the rim with his fingers, his voice lowering, becoming more precise, almost ritualistic. Every night I'll ask you one question, he said. Only one, and only honest answers will do. Vanessa's brow lifted, just slightly. The game had officially begun. Dominic paused, his eyes locked with hers. Tonight's question, he said. Where do you feel the safest? Vanessa instinctively held her breath, then answered with a tense smile. Well, I can tell you it's definitely not here. Dominic didn't speak right away. He tilted his head, narrowing his eyes at her, lips parting just enough to let his stare do the talking. Then, one sentence. Those who come closest to the truth are usually the most dangerous. He sipped his wine, his gaze drifting, from Vanessa's eyes to the silver chain resting against her skin, to the black silk draped over her chest, then back to her face. Deflection, he murmured. A person under threat won't answer directly. They turn it into a joke. Humor is the mind's oldest shield. The smile on Vanessa's face faded, just slightly. Dominic leaned back in his chair, fingers trailing along the edge of the table, slow and deliberate. If I don't know where you feel safe, he said, it makes it harder to control you, but easier to understand you. He went quiet again, eyes dropping back to his plate. Vanessa gripped the arms of her chair, her mind racing with 100 thoughts at once. His games were deeper than they looked. Every word was a sketch, every answer a map. Dominic stood slowly. Dinner's over. Be in the study at midnight. I've chosen a book for you. Vanessa rose to her feet. Which one? He glanced at her barely. You'll see when you get there. Dominic stood. For a second, his eyes lingered on Vanessa, just barely. Then he turned, disappearing into the shadows of the room without a word. His absence weighed heavier than his presence. Vanessa's fingers curled around the stem of her glass, almost unconsciously. Her mind was still trying to piece everything together when the kitchen door creaked open. Ernest entered, silent and expressionless, as always. He set a silver tray down by the edge of the table and began clearing the plates. Vanessa turned toward him with a soft, almost performative smile, trying perhaps to mask her tension. Dinner was excellent, she said. My compliments to the chef. Ernest gave a small, polite nod, but he didn't smile, didn't say a word. Vanessa set her glass down slowly. As she stepped out of the dining room, her eyes moved across the space. This house didn't whisper secrets, it screamed them. Every surface, every detail, something was always being hidden. Her gaze caught on something to the right of the entryway. A black, lacquered door. No sound came from behind it. She reached for the handle and turned it. The room was dark, but as she stepped in, a few wall-mounted screens flickered to life. Not just a utility room, this was surveillance, a control center. Some of the monitors were off, but the ones that were on showed clear live feeds, the front entrance, the dining room, the hall. One of them showed a dark, windowless room, just an empty chair, and behind it, a shadow. Vanessa narrowed her eyes, focusing on the monitors. She scanned each feed carefully, searching for a view of her own room. Just then, she heard a voice behind her. I'll be showing you around the house tomorrow. Miss Vanessa," Ernest said in his usual dull tone. "But for now, you should get some rest. You're expected in the study at midnight." He raised his wrist slightly and pointed to his watch. "You have 2 hours." Vanessa let herself fall onto the bed. The dim light washed over her skin like liquid silver. And then, those amber eyes came back to her. Dominic Roth. There was something fixed and threatening in his gaze. It didn't just watch you, it searched you, as if he could scent the folds of your brain. Their first encounter, the dinner, and that single question he asked, echoed in her mind like 10 traps hidden inside one sentence. "Where do you feel the safest?" By the time she realized her body had relaxed, it was already too late. Her eyelids grew heavy. Sleep pulled at her like silk, impossible to resist. When she opened her eyes, the room was still bathed in soft yellow light. But then she looked at the clock and felt her throat tighten. It was 12:05. Midnight had already passed. She bolted from the bed, hair flying, breath tight. Her bare feet hit the cold floor as she ran into the hallway. Her pulse was already racing, panic blooming in her chest. The door to the study was slightly open. She pushed it in. Dominic was sitting in a large leather chair, turned toward the door. A glass of whiskey rested in his hand. The silence in the room wasn't just still, it pressed down on her, sharp and deliberate. He lifted his eyes from the glass and locked them on her. "You're late this time, Miss Quinn. And I don't like that." Vanessa swallowed hard, frozen just inside the door. Dominic's gaze traced her, slowly, intentionally, starting at her eyes, pausing at her lips, then continuing downward all the way to her bare feet. "Where are your shoes?" Vanessa blinked, caught off guard. She glanced down. "Oh, I must have fallen asleep. When I saw the time, I just ran straight here. I can go put something on if you'd prefer, Mr. Roth." Dominic pressed his lips together, as if holding back the hint of a smile. "No need. I like you this way. Come here." His voice was calm but commanding. Vanessa moved toward him on the tips of her toes, each step slower than the last. Why did she feel completely exposed in front of this man? She was fully dressed, yet somehow it didn't matter. Dominic pointed to the leather armchair across from him. "Have a seat." She hesitated. The chair was far too close. Close enough that if he reached forward, he could almost touch her. Her dress, short, black, and barely clinging to formality, suddenly felt too thin, too soft. She sat down slowly, straightening her posture, but nothing could slow her pulse. They stared at each other for what felt like a full minute, maybe longer. His amber eyes didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't give her anywhere to hide. Vanessa's hand drifted to her hair. That old habit, again. She pulled a strand between her fingers and brought it to her lips. She hadn't even realized how badly she needed the comfort. Not until now. Dominic's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but something close. "Nervous, Vanessa." He used my first name. The thought landed in Vanessa's mind like a whisper. For the first time, he hadn't said Miss Quinn, just Vanessa. Her voice slipped out before she could catch it. Yes, a whisper. Unwilling, honest. Dominic's lips parted slightly. She could see his tongue graze across his teeth, subtle, slow, amused. He liked the answer. Vanessa's tongue flicked across her own lips, dry from tension. "What would you like me to read?" Dominic gave no verbal response. He simply glanced toward the small side table beside her. A single book sat waiting. Vanessa reached for the book with just her fingertips. As if touching it too fully might commit her to something she couldn't take back. The cover felt like velvet under her skin, deep burgundy and soft to the touch, etched in gold across the front, a single name. Anais Nin. Her eyes slid to the subtitle beneath it, Delta of Venus. Her throat tightened, dry, unprepared. Dominic took a slow sip of his drink, his voice low and deliberate. Page 81, like he was starting a ritual. Vanessa flipped through the pages, her fingers trembling slightly against the paper. She found the spot. The title on the page made her stomach twist. Her lips parted. The first word slipped out, barely audible. Elena. Vanessa stole a glance at Dominic. He hadn't moved an inch. Still locked in place, his eyes fixed on her, unwavering, patient, but mercilessly focused. She inhaled deeply. And then, with a voice steadier than she felt, she began to read aloud. Elena walked barefoot across the marble floor. Her body caught the moonlight spilling in through the French balcony, glowing, nearly translucent. The man watched her back at first, the sway of her hips, the shadow dipping at the base of her spine, the strands of wet hair clinging to her shoulders. He didn't touch her. Not yet. Before she turned around, her breasts had already begun to rise beneath the slip, barely, but just enough. When her eyes found his, the smile on her lips was something between a confession and a dare. "You're just watching me," she said. He didn't answer. Vanessa paused, swallowing hard as she looked into the amber eyes, staring back at her. God, those eyes. The way they watch me, like they're stripping me down, flooding me with shame. I feel naked, exposed, powerless, she thought. Dominic gave the faintest smile, just the corner of his mouth lifting. "Keep going, Vanessa." Vanessa continued to read, but this time her voice was lower. The man walked to her slowly and, without saying a word, knelt down. He didn't place his hands on her hips. He held the backs of her knees instead. Elena's breath caught, her fingers curled toward her own stomach. "Keep going," the woman said. The man bowed his head and began to open her like a book. Vanessa's voice grew thinner as she read. Fragile, almost breaking, her throat tightened and the words trembled on her lips instead of flowing. As she turned the page, her eyes were no longer on the lines, but on Dominic's gaze. She couldn't skip a single word. This was a test, but it was also exposure. Dominic rose slowly. His steps were soundless. He moved around her, still holding the book. His voice came from just behind her, near her neck. "Continue." Vanessa closed her eyes for a second. Her breath came shallow, trapped between shame and arousal. Then she looked back down at the page. Elena parted her legs. The man didn't look into her eyes. He just listened to her body, moved inside her without a word. The deepest kind of trust between two people, Elena thought, is being understood without saying a single thing. And he understood everything. Vanessa closed the book. Her hands rested on her knees, her head slightly bowed. Dominic stood in front of her, silent. There were just inches between them. For a moment, all she could hear was her heartbeat, and it was racing. Vanessa slowly lifted her head. Dominic leaned in, his eyes locked on hers. "I'm going to have you read to me every night, Vanessa," he said, almost in a whisper, "but every book will take something from you." Vanessa looked up. Her voice, laced with a mix of fear and awe, barely rose above her breath. "What will it take?" Dominic's gaze dropped to her lips. "Your control." It was 7:30 a.m. Vanessa woke up with a jolt. For a moment, she just lay there, staring into the dimly lit room. Had it been a dream? The book? Dominic? That chair? She got up, walked into the bathroom, and splashed cold water on her face. In the mirror, her reflection stared back at her. "Where do you feel the safest?" The question still echoed in her mind. Safe? In this house? Around that man? At exactly 8 o'clock, the white lilies arrived. Vanessa placed them carefully around the house. On the marble table in the foyer, at the center of the dining room, in a small niche along the corridor, their scent gave the place a strange sense of cleanliness. Ironic, because everything in this house was seductive enough to make her feel dirty. She slipped into a fitted white dress. It hugged her body perfectly, but the neckline was generous, too generous, almost like it was designed that way, on purpose. She stood in front of the mirror, frowning without realizing the wrinkle forming between her brows. Why is everything so exposed? The clothes, this house. It's like I'm being tested through my femininity. The truth was, she'd never gotten along with men. Never trusted them. It only took one move, one lie, and a man could shatter a woman forever. Her sister, Michelle, 8 years ago, she'd jumped from the 9th floor after a relationship went wrong. And something inside Vanessa had broken for good. Since then, she'd kept her distance, wore detachment like armor. But this house was different. It felt like a maze designed to force her to face the parts of her past she'd left untouched. Dominic's quiet threats, his eyes scanning right through her. Every step in this place felt like it belonged to a woman who wasn't her. And yet, she had to move like she was always being watched. Like every second was part of an exam she couldn't afford to fail. At 9 o'clock, she came downstairs. The breakfast room was far from the darkness of the night before. Light poured in through the wide windows, spilling over the white tablecloth, catching the crystal glasses and reflecting along the curves of Vanessa's dress. Dominic was already at the table, sipping his coffee while staring at his phone. His pale yellow linen shirt, with its sleeves neatly rolled and top 2 buttons undone, made the color of his eyes stand out even more. He glanced at Vanessa, said nothing, but his gaze felt like a message. She didn't speak until she'd taken her seat. Then, in a quiet but firm tone, he said, "Today I'll tell you what you're going to do." There was no request in it, not a trace of morning courtesy. Vanessa looked away from his eyes, just for a second. Dominic went on, as if reading from an internal checklist. "Send email invitations to 120 people. No RSVP needed. They'll all show up." He paused. His gaze carried more than just instruction. "They look forward to these parties," he said. The implication in his voice unsettled Vanessa. His tone carried layers, some of them too dark, too loaded to be named, and some she wasn't sure she wanted to understand. "Ernest will show you around the house," he continued. "He'll give you the list of what I expect in the party area. You'll handle the catering, music, lighting, guest reception. Everything needs to be flawless." His words landed with precision, sharp. Vanessa nodded. "Understood," was all she could say. Dominic set his cup down on the table and stood up. "I have to head out now." Vanessa didn't say a word. Before leaving, Dominic gave her one last look. "No, see you later. No, have a good day." Just a look, heavy enough to say everything. And with that silence, it felt like he took all the sound in the house with him. When breakfast was over, Ernest was waiting for Vanessa in the sitting room. His posture was just as stiff and formal as the night before. But now there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, as if he too was calculating whether Vanessa could pass whatever unspoken test she'd been handed. "Per Mr. Roth's instructions, I'm to give you a full tour of the house, Miss Quinn," he said. "You'll need to be familiar with certain sections, especially in preparation for the event this Saturday night." Vanessa gave a small nod. "I'm ready," she said. The house felt like a maze. Their first stop was the systems room on the 2nd floor. Walls lined with monitors, surveillance feeds, tangled wires, and server racks. It looked more like a command center than anything in a private residence. "All internal cameras, audio controls, and automation systems are managed here," Ernest said flatly. "Mr. Roth values precision." Vanessa's eyes caught on one of the screens. Her bedroom. Live. She quickly looked away. Next, they moved toward the west wing, where massive glass doors opened onto a sprawling terrace. The infinity pool melted into the horizon as if it bled straight into the sky. Just beyond its edge, a stretch of pristine white sand marked a private beach. Vanessa stepped barefoot onto the stone beside the pool. She nudged it with her toe, testing the temperature maybe, or just grounding herself. A soft ocean breeze swept her hair to one side. "This view, it doesn't even feel real," she said, her voice laced with awe. This time, Ernest smiled. Down the corridor next to the terrace, a tall, modern-designed wooden door caught Vanessa's eye. It stood closed. As they passed, Ernest didn't offer any explanation, just kept walking. Vanessa didn't ask, but she knew that had to be his space, Dominic Roth's sanctum. At the end of the hall, Ernest opened two guest rooms side by side. One was dressed in cool greys and navy, masculine, minimal, controlled. The other, soft creams and beiges, carried a quiet, peaceful warmth. "You already know the office," Ernest said, his voice for the first time almost warm. Vanessa glanced into the room where just last night she'd felt emotionally trapped. She turned to Ernest, her voice low. "These books, has Mr. Roth actually read them all?" Ernest nodded. Mr. Roth isn't just a tech company owner. He also studied neuropsychology and behavioral sciences. Sometimes he sits in that office for hours just reading. With that, he closed the office door. As they descended into the basement, Vanessa's steps slowed. The atmosphere was different, colder, quieter. The walls were thicker here, and the lighting was no longer warm and golden, but a muted shade of blue. Ernest stopped in front of a door. It was black, but not just black, it was covered in velvet. Vanessa ran her fingers across the surface, feeling the texture beneath her skin. Ernest opened the door. Inside, it was as big as a nightclub, and nearly as dark. Purple lights embedded in the ceiling cast shifting shadows across the walls. A wide bar stretched along one side, lined with crystal decanters filled with rare liquors. Velvet sofas ran wall to wall, some large enough to resemble beds. A few poles and small stage platforms were scattered across the room. Vanessa narrowed her eyes, scanning the space. What is this place, she thought, caught between unease and curiosity. Her heartbeat quickened. "Ernest, what kind of parties happen here?" she asked, unable to hide the edge in her voice. Ernest stopped. He took a few seconds before answering, as if weighing each word. Then he met her gaze and said, "For very special people. Very special parties, Miss Vanessa. You'll see when you attend." As Vanessa sat in front of the computer in her room, a faint chill ran across her shoulders. Her fingers moved silently over the keyboard, entering email addresses one by one. Each name was more shocking than the last. International art collectors, wives of former heads of state, business world ghosts, the kind of names that could silence any gossip column. Even Cassandra hadn't seen this coming. "Unbelievable," she whispered. She glanced around, then quickly reached for an empty envelope on the desk. Pulling out a thin slip of paper, she began writing the names by hand. Every letter rushed but precise. She couldn't trust the computer, not the phone. Dominic Roth was a tech genius. Every device in this house was under his control. Maybe even this moment was being watched. She tucked the handwritten notes carefully inside her white dress, right beneath the lining of her bra. Her pulse was beating in her throat. She had no idea how she would get the list out. Cassandra had promised she'd find a way. But when? How? Every inch of this house felt like it was wired into her nerves, not just physically, emotionally, her sense of womanhood, safety, even memory. All of it was being tested here, and the test was Roth's masterpiece. She shifted to the order list on her screen, catering arrangements. As her eyes scanned the lines, a few items made her pause. Truffle-infused asparagus sticks, gold leaf optional, fresh figs with vanilla mascarpone cream, rose petals. She blinked. Her eyes moved lower on the screen. Cherries marinated in amber liqueur. Belle Epoque rosé, lit packaging. A flicker of surprise passed over her face, maybe even reluctant admiration. Then her gaze stopped at a final line, clearly handwritten. Love Potion number 9. For select guests only. Serve per instruction. She lifted her eyes to Ernest. What exactly is in this cocktail? Ernest gave a polite, almost knowing smile. I'm not meant to know more than I'm told, Miss Vanessa. It was infuriatingly courteous and vague. She looked back at the screen. At the very bottom, another handwritten addition. Gilded strawberries, chili stuffed. Vanessa let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. This menu's from another planet. That night, after eating dinner alone in her room, Vanessa stepped out onto the balcony. The sky was still pitch black. The air coming in from the ocean carried a salty chill and the low hum of distant waves. The thin straps of her white dress fluttered in the breeze. As she brought her hair to her lips with her fingertips, she lit a cigarette. The first inhale hit deeper than expected, and with it came that familiar pressure rising from within. That feeling, the one that crept in like fog. That strange, heavy alienation that made her feel like she didn't belong anywhere, not to anyone, not even to this world, like she was slipping out of herself. When it came, it didn't just weigh down her thoughts, it swallowed her whole. Mind, body, memory. In those moments, she only wanted one thing, to retreat to a place that felt safe. But where was that place? She had none. And that man, on the very first night, had somehow seen right through her and asked the one question she couldn't answer. Where do you feel safe? This house, every wall, every mirror, every silence, it all watched her, tracked her, not just her body, but her mind, her soul, her womanhood. Even in Dominic's absence, his presence clung to everything. The next morning, when Vanessa came down for breakfast, Dominic was nowhere to be seen. Ernest, ever the polite distance wrapped in a suit, offered a slight bow. Mr. Roth left last night for an urgent trip. He'll be back this evening. He's requested dinner with you at 8 o'clock. Vanessa gave a small nod, her eyes drifting to the security cameras. Then, slowly, she reached for her coffee. Plans had changed. And that was an opportunity. Moments later, she was in the control room. Sneakers muffled her steps on the stairs. Inside, oversized monitors bathed the space in a cold glow. Vanessa sat, cracked her fingers. Digital forensics, her ground, her rules. First step, disconnect from the network, switch to USB air gap. Her eyes scanned the directory tree, fast, focused, then she froze. Obsidian, algorithm V0.98. It was buried deep, hidden like a mine. Her heart kicked up. She tapped the screen. Access denied, biometric match, encrypted token, hardware key. This wasn't security, it was obsession, but she didn't need access. Now she had a name, Obsidian Algorithm. Cassandra had been right. Dominic hadn't just done something dangerous, he had built it. And, for the first time since stepping into this house, she was ahead. Vanessa stepped into the dining room, the crimson fabric of her dress brushing against her legs with each measured step. Her heels clicked softly on the marble floor, echoing like a countdown. Dominic was already seated at the head of the table, a glass of wine in hand, his posture as composed as ever. The table was elegantly set. Nothing excessive, but nothing left to chance. It was curated, just like everything else in this house. His eyes moved over her, slowly, deliberately. From her hair to her shoulders, down to her hips and legs. Not a word left his mouth, but his gaze spoke loud enough. Vanessa walked to the opposite side, sat down gracefully, and placed her napkin on her lap. She kept her chin high, back straight, but she could feel his eyes still locked on her. Seconds passed. The silence settled between them like a veil. Then she spoke, calm but deliberate. "You weren't here yesterday." She looked directly at him, meeting his gaze without blinking. "As your assistant, shouldn't I be informed about your travel plans?" Dominic smiled, the corners of his mouth curling just enough to register. He leaned back slightly in his chair, swirling his wineglass between two fingers before lifting his gaze back to her. "Were you curious, Miss Quinn?" Vanessa's breath caught for just a second. Miss Quinn. He'd called her Vanessa before, in the office, in the study, in moments that felt more intimate than they should have. But now, again, formality, distance, and behind that distance, control. Dominic caught the flicker of surprise in Vanessa's eyes. She could swear. He enjoyed that. Vanessa answered without looking at him, her gaze fixed on her wineglass. Assistants are supposed to know and track things like that. "I'm not a man who likes all his movements known," Dominic replied, almost playfully. His words were soft, like candlelight, but the kind that could still burn. Vanessa didn't respond. She took a slow sip of her wine. Dominic waited a beat before shifting the subject, then his voice dipped into something lighter, more casual. "Would you like to attend the party Saturday night?" Vanessa tilted her head slightly and smiled, but her eyes stayed sharp, alert. "What kind of party are we talking about?" Dominic began to slowly rotate the glass in his hand. When he set it down, his voice had deepened, almost darkened. "The kind of party that could change you, Miss Quinn." "Still interested? And you?" Vanessa asked, her voice no longer a whisper, bold now. "Do you want me to attend?" She caught herself thinking, "I think I'm starting to enjoy this game." That uneasy feeling, that lurking dread, it was gone tonight, and its absence felt almost like relief. Dominic looked mildly surprised. "Answering a question with a question again, Miss Quinn. It's a habit I'll need you to break." His tone was firm, but not unkind. "Yes or no, will you attend?" Vanessa didn't flinch. She held his gaze, lifted her glass, finished the last sip of wine, and set it down with a soft clink. Her answer was clear, unwavering. "Yes." A pause fell between them. Dominic held her gaze for a moment, long enough to feel like a challenge. Then he leaned in slightly, resting his hand near his glass. "I have one more question for you," he said, his words landing like careful pieces on a chessboard. "When you realize you've affected someone, do you use it, or do you run?" Vanessa didn't look away this time. She held his gaze like a detective studying a suspect, trying to read the truth buried in those dark amber eyes. Then she tilted her head slightly. The part of her that always calculated, always assessed, wanted to analyze the question, weigh the implications, craft a clean, rational answer. But not tonight. Tonight, she was someone else. She set her glass down gently, her fingers slipping slowly from the curve of the stem. Then she smiled, small but sharp. "If I've affected him, and we're both still here," her eyes flicked to his lips, then back to his, "I guess it's already too late to run." Dominic's lips parted, and a slow smile spread across his face. Not wide, but enough to show he liked her answer. Then he set his glass down, hard. "I want you to read to me tonight." Vanessa blinked. Her voice, when it came, had slipped back into something cautious. "But tonight's not Tuesday." Dominic stood up slowly, adjusting his cuffs. "New rule," he said. "Whenever I say it's time, then it's time." He turned away, voice cool and final as he walked off. "Be in my room at midnight, Miss Quinn." Vanessa couldn't take the throbbing in her head any longer. She walked into the kitchen, where Ernest was wiping down the counter with clinical precision. "Ernest, do you have anything for a headache? It's becoming unbearable." Ernest turned toward her with his usual calm demeanor. "I'm sorry, Miss Vanessa. Mr. Roth doesn't allow medication in the house." Vanessa furrowed her brows. "Excuse me? I'm just asking for a painkiller, something basic." Ernest gave a slight nod, unwavering. "Nothing of the sort is kept here. However, I can make you some turmeric tea, or Mr. Roth can assist you himself." She blinked. "Sorry, Mr. Roth?" Her tone was cautious now. "How exactly is he going to help with a headache?" Ernest didn't miss a beat. "I'll notify him. If he's available, he'll let you know when to come." Vanessa walked back to her room, unsettled. Absent-mindedly, she brought a strand of hair to her lips again. This house was strange. The butler was stranger. And Dominic Roth, he was beyond strange. That familiar unease began crawling back under her skin. All she wanted was to step out onto the balcony and light a cigarette. 30 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Ernest stood there, as composed as ever. "Mr. Roth would like to see you in his office, Miss Vanessa." Still in her red dress and the heels she was dying to take off, Vanessa made her way down the hallway. As usual, the office door was slightly ajar. She peeked inside. Dominic's back was to her. He was hunched slightly forward, doing something at the counter, surrounded by glass bottles. Without turning around, he spoke, calm, clear, in control. "Come in, Vanessa, and close the door behind you." Vanessa walked to the center of the office. Just as she was about to sit in the chair where she usually read, Dominic spoke, without turning, as if he had eyes in the back of his head. "Not the chair, the armchair, Vanessa." She hesitated for a second, then moved to the low, wide leather armchair. Now Dominic was behind her. She waited. The silence stretched. Then the softest sound of footsteps. Dominic emerged in front of her, holding a shallow silver bowl in both hands. A warm, unfamiliar scent drifted up from it, rich, floral, and something darker beneath. He stood directly in front of her, watching, waiting. Dominic cupped the silver bowl in his hands, warming the thick golden oil between his palms. Then, without a word, he sank to his knees, onto a floor cushion directly in front of her. Vanessa blinked, caught off guard, unsure what she was watching unfold. Dominic's amber eyes locked onto hers. "I'm going to take off your shoes," he said, voice low but precise, "and I'm going to touch you, in a way that will ease the pain. Do I have your permission?" Vanessa shifted in her seat, her discomfort obvious. I'm not sure I understand. I mean, if I had some ibuprofen, that would probably help." "In this house," Dominic replied calmly, "you'll only find oils, spices, and herbs. If you let me, I can take the pain away, in minutes." He opened his hands, slowly, as if making an offering. "Do you want that?" Vanessa hesitated. "I don't know. You're my employer. It just feels, a little strange." Dominic was still on his knees, leaning slowly toward her. "Do you want this, Vanessa?" Her fingers drifted to a lock of her hair. She swallowed. "Okay," she said, trying to force a nervous smile. Without breaking eye contact, Dominic began to unfasten her heels. Slow, deliberate, he gently lifted her right leg onto his knee, then looked up again. "I need to hear you say it. Do you want this?" "I said, okay," Vanessa repeated, her voice sharper than she intended. Her own breathing was starting to annoy her, uneven, shallow, too loud. She had no idea how to process a moment like this. It was too quiet, too close, too strange. "I want it or I don't. Those are your only two options." Dominic had a way of pushing, relentlessly, unnervingly. I want it," Vanessa whispered, barely audible. Dominic reached forward and gently wrapped his hands around her ankles. His touch was warm, too warm. almost burning. He held her gaze as he lifted her right leg and rested it lightly across his knee. Then, slowly, he let a single drop of oil fall from his thumb onto the inside of her ankle. The thick, golden liquid slid down her skin. Vanessa inhaled sharply. "I call this the silencing touch," Dominic murmured, "because after this, you forget how to speak." When Dominic's thumbs pressed into the reflex points along the arch of her foot, it wasn't just the headache that began to fade. It was everything. The tight coil of invisible tension that had built up in her body all day began to slowly, deliberately unravel. His fingers glided along her soul, sometimes soft, sometimes firm, and Vanessa couldn't quite tell if she was relaxing or bracing for something else. Then he pressed into the deepest part of her arch, slick with warm oil, and her spine gave a sudden shiver. This wasn't just a massage. It felt like a ritual, one that didn't speak to her muscles, but whispered straight to her nerves. Every movement released pressure, only to transform it into something else entirely. Vanessa leaned her head back, eyes falling shut without permission. Dominic's thumbs moved from her ankle toward the arch of her foot, pressing into nerves that seemed to echo in places far beyond where he touched. A slow buzz stirred inside her thighs, a low heat bloomed just beneath her belly, and somewhere near her chest something restless pulsed, fast, irregular, alive. Her breath stuttered, her lips parted, but no sound came. Something inside her was unraveling and tightening at the same time, a forgotten tension, a repressed memory of sensation, rising like a tide she hadn't realized was waiting. Dominic's voice came from just inches away. "There are touches," he said, "that hit like words, but only the body knows what they mean." A low sound slipped from Vanessa's throat, a gasp, almost a whimper, something she hadn't meant to give, but it was already out. Her muscles hung somewhere between release and restraint, as if the chair beneath her had turned to air, and then his thumb pressed into the center of her soul, firm, precise, not painful, just exact. Something inside her let go. Her eyes were closed, but her body pulsed with one thing: vibration, deep, warm, slow, but impossibly intense. It rolled up from between her hips, spread through her chest, her throat, and stole her breath on the way. A tremor, unnamed, rising from somewhere she couldn't touch. Dominic moved silently behind her. Vanessa sat frozen in the aftershock of something she couldn't name, couldn't trace. Her fingertips clutched the fabric of the chair. Her own body felt like a stranger. What just happened? Dominic leaned in close, so close his voice felt like it came from inside her skull. "Did you like it, Vanessa? Is the pain gone?" Vanessa had bitten her lip without realizing it. She needed to answer, to wrestle down the shame rising in her chest, the unraveling, the way she had given in without even knowing how. She pressed her lips harder until they felt dry. "Yes," she said, flat, emotionless. "The pain is gone." But Dominic's voice didn't shift. Still calm, still studying her, as if dissecting a text only he could read. "Your body's still holding tension." He stepped back. Then, slowly, he knelt, one hand on the back of the chair, the other at the edge of her shoulder. When he spoke, his voice was like a lecturer's, clear, instructive. But beneath it was something else, an invitation. "In Chinese medicine," he said, "it's believed the body carries a life force called Chi. It flows through specific channels, but suppressed emotions, fears, or desires left unmet for too long." Vanessa's eyes slowly turned to meet his. "They disrupt that flow. The energy gets trapped, especially in the lower abdomen. We call it a lower dantian blockage." He paused, then tilted his head slightly, his gaze steady. "In women it often stems from..." a sense of being untouched, or a sensuality that's never truly been explored. Vanessa's throat went dry. What was he implying? A suggestion or a diagnosis? Dominic didn't break the silence. "That's why massage isn't just about relaxing muscles," he said, voice low but steady. "Sometimes it's about unlocking a door that's been shut for years." He tilted his head, watching her. "And your doors, Vanessa, they don't look like they've ever been opened." Vanessa was getting angry. This man's presumptuous confidence, the way he spoke as if everything about her were his to interpret, it unsettled her. "Well," she said, trying to keep the irritation out of her voice, "it's impressive how much insight you've gained from a foot massage. Should I expect tarot cards next?" Inside, her thoughts raced. He's not undressing me with his hands, but with his words. The nerve of him. Dominic tilted his head, a slight smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "I like the bite of humor in your defenses, Vanessa." Their eyes locked. Vanessa looked away, afraid he might actually be reading everything. Dominic stood up slowly, never taking his eyes off hers. "I'd suggest you get a good night's sleep," he said. "Your body might have just let the doors open for the first time." He paused. "This could be the beginning, if you want it to be." As he walked toward the door with deliberate steps, he added over his shoulder, "You won't need to read tonight." From the tone of his voice, Vanessa knew whatever he wanted from her this evening, he'd already taken it. She stayed seated for a long moment. On the edge of the chair, she exhaled, deep and heavy, still trying to understand exactly what it was she had just allowed. Saturday morning. Vanessa had been awake before sunrise. By 8, the house was already buzzing. Florists were moving in and out of the upstairs rooms. Packages and people were pouring through the front door every 5 minutes. Downstairs, the basement hall, the party venue, was a construction zone. Overhead lighting was still being mounted. The DJ booth and bar were halfway set up. "This place will be ready for tonight," she thought. But somehow, I feel like I'm the only one who isn't. Just then, "Excuse me, ma'am," said a young male voice behind her. He was carrying a large container packed with ice. "Where would you like these oysters?" Vanessa turned to look, but before their eyes met, the young man stepped in a little closer, dipped his head slightly and whispered, "I'm Andy. Cassandra sent me. I can take what you need delivered." Vanessa's throat went dry. She glanced around. No one was paying attention. To an outsider, this moment looked like a routine catering exchange, quick logistics between a guest coordinator and a staff member. But the truth ran much deeper. Without fully thinking, just instinct, she reached into the side of her bra and pulled out the tiny drive she'd hidden there. She hesitated, just for a second. Who is this guy? Was he really Cassandra's contact? But there was no time, and no other option. She placed the drive, wrapped in the folded scrap of notepaper, into Andy's hand. Her fingers brushed against his palm, and her body responded with a subtle shiver of anxiety. Andy kept his gaze fixed ahead, voice low and even. "Don't worry. I'll find a way to reach you again." Then he turned his eyes to her. This time, direct, quiet, almost a breath. "We're watching you." Vanessa's heart skipped once, then kicked hard in her chest. Andy turned and walked away. Just another delivery guy hauling ice to the back. But for Vanessa, everything had shifted. She wasn't just an assistant anymore. She was in the field now, and she could only hope, pray, that Cassandra wouldn't let anything happen to her. By early evening, Vanessa stepped into her room completely drained. The last light of the day streamed through the window, casting a golden glow across the bed, and there, lit like a still life, lay the thing that stopped her in her tracks. Black lace, delicate, precise, the soft shimmer of silk ribbons catching the sun in flickers, and just beside it, carefully placed on the table, a mask. Not just any mask. One that covered most of the face. Theatrical, inevitable. It didn't ask to be worn, it commanded it. Its black lacquer surface caught hints of color in its swirls, like something painted for seduction, or for secrecy. Beautiful and quietly menacing. Vanessa slowed her steps, breath tightening in her chest. Was she expected to wear this? But this wasn't clothing. It was almost a fantasy. The corset-style top and the tight waistline didn't hide her body. They exposed it even more, light as tulle, sheer as lace. From every angle, this wasn't an invitation. It was a challenge. And there, on the bed, a small black envelope. Her hands were shaking. She got angry at herself when she noticed. She opened it. The textured paper felt like parchment, and the dark ink, handwritten in elegant strokes, seemed to whisper, "Are you ready to meet your shadow? Tonight at midnight, what calls you behind the mask won't just be curiosity. Don't be afraid. What you see may unsettle you, but if you allow what hides behind the mask to surface, you might finally face your true self. And remember, the mask only hides your face. It reveals your soul." Vanessa's throat went dry. As she set the paper down on the table, a shiver ran through her, uninvited, undeniable. She knew this was a game, a performance, a carefully constructed scene, and yet, somewhere deep inside, every word on that page had landed like a quiet tremor. She felt it, and it shook her. Vanessa could feel the black lace clinging to her body like fire, burning softly against her skin. She began descending the stairs, each step slow, deliberate, almost soundless. The house was empty, no Ernest, no voices, no signs of life at all, except the music. A low, pulsing rhythm drifting up from below, distant but undeniable. It slithered through the walls like a whisper, not quite a song, not quite a summons, but it knew her name. The beat clawed at her chest with every step. That slow, venomous thump of "Love is a bitch" in the background, seductive, unnerving, wrapped itself around her like a second skin. At the bottom of the stairs, she stood still, just her and the black velvet door. She stared at it for several seconds. She was scared, no use pretending otherwise, but it was too late to turn back now. She pushed the door open, slowly, and the world changed. Instantly, she stepped into something else, a haze, a hush, a space so dimly lit it felt like walking into a dream she hadn't meant to have. The air was thick, intoxicating, a scent she couldn't name wrapped around her like smoke, jasmine, leather, maybe even skin. The room was vast, but hard to measure, like its edges didn't want to be found. Everything was cast in a low, blurred light, as if the air itself was soft-focused. Nothing felt entirely real, but every breath told her this was very real. And the people, they were masked, black, gold, red, adorned with feathers, stones, elaborate filigree. The women moved through the haze like living illusions, draped in sheer fabrics that left little to imagine, corsets cinched tight, garters, heels that made every step a declaration. The men walked a line between elegance and exposure, some in open jackets with bare chests, others shirtless entirely, wrists encircled by cuffs that looked more like restraints than jewelry. Some kissed in shadowed corners, some lounged on velvet couches, fingers exploring skin without hesitation, and in between them the servers drifted silently, dressed in all black suits, eyes hidden behind blank, featureless masks. They carried trays of champagne, caviar, oysters, and clouds of perfumed smoke that curled like whispers in the air. Small, raised platforms. On them, 4 masked dancers, 2 women, 2 men, bodies slicked with oil or something like it. Light didn't just touch their skin, it slid across it. Their movements were slow, fluid, almost hypnotic. Vanessa's eyes drifted upward, scanning the walls, the ceiling. She knew tiny lenses hidden in the carved molding, glass eyes behind the chandeliers. No one here was alone. Every breath, every look, every inch of skin, watched, logged. A passing server left a cloud of something fragrant in his wake. Not perfume exactly, but close, potent, dizzying. Vanessa stopped, just for a moment, before she stepped in any further. Before the velvet shadows swallowed her whole. The darkness whispered, "How deep are you willing to go to meet your shadow?" Behind the black mask, she drew a long, steady breath and moved forward. Vanessa couldn't make out a single face behind the masks. There was no way to tell who was who. As she moved through the crowd, her steps slowed. Sometimes her gaze lingered, drawn by a silhouette, a breath, the brush of fabric. Other times, she turned her head quickly, avoiding eye contact as if it burned. This wasn't a party. It was a ritual. One where bodies blurred at the edges and identity was surrendered to silk, lace, and anonymity. And somewhere between her skin and this costume, Vanessa began to feel like a stranger to herself. As she moved deeper into the crowd, the hands that brushed against her, the bodies that grazed her skin, and the dizzying clouds of perfume made it nearly impossible to focus on what she was actually there to do: observe. Vanessa finally broke free and made her way to the bar at the farthest end of the room. It was, in truth, an escape. A moment to turn her back, literally, on the friction of bodies, the mingling of breath, the raw hunger on display. This party wasn't just a celebration, it was a portal, a carefully staged doorway into the parts of people that were never meant to be seen, and Vanessa felt a quiet, crawling kind of unease settle deep in her chest. She turned her head, eyes scanning the crowd behind her once more. This place, this ritualistic theatrical atmosphere, was it enacting hidden desires and power plays in real time? Was it designed to give people a temporary escape from the roles they wore in the daylight? Here, no one was a CEO. No one was a spouse or a politician or a name in a headline. Here, they were something else entirely. Or maybe they were finally just themselves. Vanessa stood across from the bartender, his face hidden behind a Zorro-style mask, as her eyes locked onto the gleaming bottles lining the back shelf. In the low light, they sparkled like secrets left over from other nights. The bass thudded through her ribcage. It wasn't just sound. It was a pulse, a heartbeat she couldn't outrun. The bartender leaned in to hear her. "Martini," she said, barely louder than a breath. He nodded slowly. As he slid the glass toward her, he asked, "Yellow or green, ma'am?" Vanessa froze for a second. Her gaze dropped to his open palm. Two small tablets sat there, metallic and shimmering like candy that might melt on your tongue and erase your name. Sleek, suspicious, and somehow expected. "What are those, Arthur?" Siscado. The bartender shrugged like it was no big deal. "Sensual maximizer," he said, like it was a splash of lemon or a sugar cube. Vanessa lifted her hand instinctively, a sharp gesture of refusal. "No." Then she reached for the martini glass. The chill of the glass bit into her fingers, grounding her. The lights had dimmed further now. The room blurred like a dream on the edge of a memory, and Vanessa realized, with or without the masks, in this haze, no one would truly see anyone anyway. Just then, she felt it, the warmth of a body. Close. Too close. That invisible boundary called personal space, gone. Shattered. She turned her head and came face to face with a mask, jet black, glossy, full face, leaving only the eyes exposed. And those eyes, amber, piercing, still, watching her like they knew every thought before it formed. Vanessa's lips parted. She realized she'd stopped breathing. The man lifted his hand, slowly. In his palm, resting like something sacred, was a single golden tablet, glowing faintly, waiting. He didn't say a word. Still holding her gaze, he reached forward and dropped the gold tablet into Vanessa's martini. It hit the liquid with a quiet fizz, dissolving into a swirl of shimmering dust. The drink lit up like a melted gem. Vanessa stared at it, half in curiosity, half in disbelief. Then she looked up. He hadn't moved, his eyes still locked on hers. Slowly, he tilted his head, just enough to break the tension. His lips shaped one word: drink. No voice, no force, but the silence carried weight, not quite a command, not quite a request, just enough pressure to make her heart knock against her ribs. And the way he looked at her, it wasn't suggestion, it was control, dressed up as choice. And in that moment, Vanessa's fingers moved on their own, wrapping around the glass. She raised it to her lips. The golden liquid touched her mouth, cold at first, but something warm began to bloom inside her, a warmth she couldn't name. He still didn't speak, just extended his hand. Vanessa, glass still in one hand, reached with the other. Their fingers met, not a touch, an erasure of space, of boundaries, of control. Those amber eyes were still burning into hers, and Vanessa's fingers, in his palm, felt like they were on fire. Time had shifted after that sip. The music faded into a low, distant thrum. Bodies blurred into ghost-like shapes. The world around them dissolved into shadows. But his hand never let go of hers, firm, certain, without hesitation. They walked without a word. He led, Vanessa followed, just one step behind. Their pace was slow, rhythmic. It felt less like moving through a crowd and more like drifting through water. Everywhere round them, hips brushing, mouths meeting, breath on skin, stories were unfolding, whispers, kisses, eyes closed in surrender. Everyone seemed lost in some trance, but their path was clear, unbroken, undisturbed. Just then, a woman stepped out from the crowd. She moved like silk, her deep slit gown trailing behind her like smoke. Her mask was ornate, rimmed with silver stones, and her eyes were locked on him. She reached out, just her fingertips brushing his chest, her voice a whisper soaked in intent. "Are you alone tonight?" He didn't stop, he simply raised his hand. No words, just the smallest flick of his fingers, a silent no. Cool, distant, final. The woman withdrew her touch instantly, lowered her head, she understood, and stepped aside. Vanessa watched it all unfold. The woman said nothing more. She didn't have to, he hadn't spoken either, but the message was clear. He was off limits, to everyone, except her. His hand stayed wrapped around hers, firm and steady, and in that moment something shifted inside Vanessa, a flicker of heat, a thread of tension that wasn't fear, but something closer to being claimed. He wasn't just keeping others away from himself, he was keeping them away from her, and that, more than anything, made her heart skip. He stopped, right in front of a marble column, glowing under the low amber light. With quiet precision, he turned Vanessa to face it, her back now pressed against his chest, his body aligned with hers, close enough to feel every breath, every shift. Then he leaned in. His mouth hovered just behind her ear. Warm breath grazed the most sensitive part of her neck. A single exhale, and she shivered. Vanessa flinched, but she didn't move away. She didn't want to. Her eyes drifted unintentionally just a few steps ahead. Built-in velvet lounges, deep, wide, more bed than seat. 3 figures on one, 2 men, 1 woman, all masked. Their clothes were still on, but somehow that only made it more unsettling. Hands and arms, mouths and knees, touching, pressing, dragging, slow, but deliberate, like hunger with instructions. Vanessa glanced, just for a second. Then she turned her head away, fast. Her breath had gone uneven. The glass in her hand had numbed her fingers, cold to the bone. But the other hand, wrapped in his, seemed to grip tighter now, stronger. The man said nothing, but he moved, just a slight tilt of his head, past her shoulder, toward the scene. It wasn't a command, but it wasn't a suggestion either. Vanessa could feel it. He wanted her to look. He wanted her to see, to react, to let whatever she was feeling rise to the surface. But Vanessa looked away. There was a low hum building inside her head now. The music had synced with her heartbeat, taking over its rhythm. Everything around her, sounds, colors, scents, felt sharper. The sensual maximizer was waking something up inside her. The sense, impossible to name, but intoxicating. The warmth radiating off his neck, the weight of his palm on her shoulder. She could feel every nerve ending in her fingers reacting to every inch of his touch. Vanessa wasn't used to this kind of closeness, not from another body. Not like this, the way her own skin responded, the way her body buzzed in sudden, uninvited waves. It was pulling her somewhere unfamiliar, somewhere she didn't recognize. Vanessa could feel her heartbeat building, not in her chest, but somewhere deeper, echoing in her ears like a warning. Her throat tightened as she realized she'd been holding her breath longer than she thought. Something was happening. Panic rose slowly, not as a scream, but as a quiet surge she couldn't ignore. She was someone who always stayed in control of her body, of her mind, of everything she let the world see. She'd never given that control to anyone, never let herself be fully seen or touched beneath the surface. But now, something else was moving inside her. A version of herself she didn't recognize, bold, open, exposed, wanted. And that sudden awakening didn't just scare her, it shook her in a way she hadn't expected. The glass slipped from Vanessa's fingers, hit the ground, shattered. She pulled free from the hand on her shoulder and threw herself back, putting as much distance as she could between them. Her heels struck the floor fast, cutting through the crowd, racing toward the black velvet door. She had to get out, now, away from this place, away from him, away from herself, like she wanted to step outside her own skin and disappear. In the dim light, masked bodies spun like a vortex, each one gliding, grinding, giving into the rhythm, reaching for other bodies without hesitation, without names. Vanessa pushed her way through the crowd, dragged forward by the swell of perfume, the brush of skin, the bursts of laughter that felt like hands around her throat, and then she felt it, a hand, pressed firmly against the small of her back, right above her hips, grounded, intentional. Behind her stood a tall, broad-shouldered man. His face was mostly bare, masked only across the eyes, plain, black, expressionless. "Don't get lost, beautiful," he said, with a lazy smile curling in his voice. Vanessa tried to turn. "Let me go," she said, sharp, but her voice cracked. The man might have thought he was flirting, but his hands were still on her, pressing into her waist, leaning into her through the crowd. Vanessa's eyes widened. He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear, and whispered slow and deliberate, "Relax. Just give in. Give yourself to me." Vanessa shoved him back with everything she had. "Don't touch me," she said louder now, her voice cutting clean through the music. As she pushed his hand away, a figure slipped between them. The black mask, the amber eyes, even in the haze, those eyes cut through the dark, lit from within. Dominic. His voice dropped into the air like vapor, low, calm. But the threat in it was crystal clear. "Step back. Don't touch her." The weight of his voice, the finality of the words, the man understood, or maybe just obeyed. Silent, hands lifted slightly, he stepped back. Vanessa could barely breathe. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The room around her began to blur, light and sound bent, folding inward. Her pupils fluttered. Dominic moved fast, stepped right in. "Vanessa," he said, low but steady. She looked at him for half a second. Then her head tilted. Vanessa's knees buckled, her vision dimmed, breath shallow, the world folding in on itself. She felt herself slipping, weightless, like a thread being pulled from the edge of reality. Then, arms, strong, sure, familiar, they caught her just before the floor did. A warm scent surrounded her, clean linen and something darker underneath. The mask was still on his face, but the eyes, amber, steady, burning through the dark. His voice came through the blur, low and close to her ear. "I've got you," he whispered. "You're safe." Vanessa's head rested against his shoulder. Her lashes fluttered. Her limbs went limp. But just before everything faded, one thought echoed through the last thread of her consciousness. Am I? Thanks for watching Masquerade Part 1. If you'd like to see what happens next, just type Part 2 in the comments. That's how I know you're enjoying the story and that you want more. Your support really means the world to me. See you soon.